This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Zia and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. Join the union to vote on albums, pick one to discuss with us on the show, get access to bonus episodes, and our private Discord community. Keep the podcast ad-free and make the next episode happen by joining us at digmeoutpodcast.com. Jay, this week, it's a rock album tournament. It's where the voice of the people is heard. We allow that.
Listen to the voice.
Listen to the Patreon people. Listen. We had 4 albums for our tournament back in July, which was, if you don't know, last month. And they were all suggested through our website, digmeoutpodcast.com. Anyone can go there. Anyone can submit. And then our Patreon community votes on them. That's why you have to listen to them. These were the 4 suggestions made, Jay. And I know you know at least one of these. I know it. I'm 100% sure you know one of these.
Well, maybe not. Maybe we're going to get a surprise today.
Okay, first suggestion. Meet John Doe by John Doe, suggested by Keith Miller. Did you know that one?
I mean, I know who John Doe is, but I had no idea he had a solo record.
Same. Hagfish Rocks Your Lame Ass by Eric Lauderdale. Hagfish, Jay?
I remember that name.
I remember the name too.
A little blip that happened.
Yeah. Dallas punk band, suggested by Eric Lauderdale. Sky Cries Mary, I Return to the Inner Experience, suggested by Eric Peterson.
Yeah, I would see this band a lot in the cutout bins.
I thought this was a completely different band, to be honest. And then lastly, Jay, AC/DC Ballbreaker. I think you know that one.
Yeah, heard a couple tracks from that one.
You heard of that band?
Yeah.
Okay. That was suggested by Patrick Testa. Those were the 4 albums. People voted. They voted not just at Patreon, Jay, but they also voted at Substack, correct?
That is right.
Combined, our winner, Sky Cries Mary, A Return to the Inner Experience. What did our folks say? Oh, by the way, I knew nothing. What's with the thumb?
I don't know.
Give me thumbs up?
No, I just have my hand up in it.
Oh, it's some sort of visual thing where it's like, hey, thumbs up.
Yeah. I just have my hand on the screen.
How do you do that? I'm just trying to. Okay, this is not good podcasting. It's all visual. So at Patreon, this is what the folks said. Chip Midnight. Weird. I was just thinking about Sky Cries Mary. I owned a few CDs, but I can't remember what they sound like. Eric Peterson, who suggested them, he said, of course, I went with Sky Cries Mary, who got showcased in the film Tank Girl, 90s psych-infected rock that isn't something that has gotten much mention on DMO, so consider giving Sky Cries Mary a listen and vote. Tank Girl, I just heard, I don't know if you remember this, side tangent for one moment, The Magnificent Bastards, Mockingbird Girl. Do you remember that song?
No.
Hey, Mockingbird. It's a Scott Weiland song from the Tank Girl soundtrack.
Okay, yeah.
You look that up because I was like, oh my God, this is a 90s throwback. I had not listened to that in forever. And it was one of those weird, one-off things. They were called, what were they? I don't remember what it was called, but it was anyway, Mockingbird Girl was the song from the Tank Girl soundtrack. Joe Roland said, I don't really have a horse in this race, perhaps AC/DC, which I have normally gone with, except this is possibly the most lackluster album in the entire catalog. Following the Cult's Electric, I was looking forward to hearing what a true partnership between Rick Rubin and AC/DC would be like. While Big Guns from the last Action Hero soundtrack was promising, The Ballbreaker album ended up being pretty lifeless and boring. I suppose I'll go Sky Cries Mary instead. Um, Patrick Testa responded to that, Jay. He said, what did he say? Where did it go? There it is. He said, I didn't realize that Rick Rubin produced Big Guns till you just said it. Yeah, that song was produced very differently, probably mainly because it was made for the opening credits of the Schwarzenegger movie. But that was 1993, and Ballbreaker was 1995, and Cult was 86 for perspective. Willie Dillon, I don't listen to a ton of punk stuff, but Hagfish sounds pretty solid, so that's my vote. Kevin said, I'm voting for Hagfish. This is a great pop punk album that is overlooked. Also, it has the best album title. I'm pretty sure I've suggested this album as well. Now, over at Substack, our website, digmeoutpodcast.com lives there. We had some comments. Benjamin Adler said, must abstain. All shall lose.
No.
Sir, this is not how Substack, this is not how polls work. Somebody has to win, even if they're not your first choice. That's called democracy. Jeff said, Hagfish is one of my all-time favorite bands. They played at my high school in 1994.
How cool is that?
That's awesome. And it was life-changing. I saw them a dozen times through the 90s and early 2000s. I learned to play guitar playing along this album. They got thoroughly chewed up by the record industry and unfairly overlooked in the pop-punk renaissance in the mid-90s. Their guitarist, Zach Blair, went on to play in Gwar and has been in Rise Against for years now. The bassist, Zach's brother Donnie, now plays bass in the Toadies. So there you go. Sorry, Hagfish. Maybe we'll get to you eventually, but we didn't get to you on this one. We will get into this a little bit, but I want to share just a little bit of history with who Sky Cries Mary were, all that kind of stuff. So essentially, this started out as a college thesis, as all rock bands do. This started out as a college thesis,
a think piece.
It's about a mid-level band struggling against its own limitations. That's what this is now. So what's crazy here is originally this band included John Auer of the King of the and Ken Stringfellow of the Posies. This is back in the late 80s. They were the lead singer of the band, or I guess you'd say kind of like the brains behind Sky Cries Mary, which is Roderick Wolgamott. I think that's how you say his name.
It sounds like a character from Game of Thrones.
Yes.
I want to see his sigil.
I think he was his last name's changed because in one article it said Romero was his last, Roderick Romero. But it was a senior thesis involved Dada-esque cacophony. So it was a big art project. It was more industrial. It was late 80s, and it was a lot of noises and stuff like that. It was described as an endurance test for local hipsters.
Yikes.
So their debut came out Under the Grinders Cease. The band was very abrasive live. And then they started adding some players along the way, adding some musicians. And I believe at some point down the road, again, because there's like a billion people in this band, he married Anisa Romero. That's the woman who's singing on the album. They were not married at the time making the record, but they eventually got married. And then there's been like just a frick ton of people through the band. For this particular record, the band is this: Robert Wolgamott Romero, vocals and art direction; Anissa Romero, vocals and art direction; Gordon Raphael, keyboards; Mark Olson, guitar; Ben Ireland, drums and percussion; Joseph E. Howard, double bass, mellotron, and sitar; DJ Fallout, sampler, turntables, and drum machine, with additional production and personnel. Beth Custer on bass clarinet on one of the songs, and then it was Joe Gastwort. He's did the mastering, not Howie Weinberg, but Joe Gastwort has like a big catalog of production. Grateful Dead, Tom Petty, ELO. They went with like a someone who would know how to do a big psychedelic record. When you get like ELO and the Grateful Dead, you know how to mix a big band. Let's put it that way.
You know how to let things get weird.
Yep. And this was released on Capitol Records.
Yeah.
This is not an indie release. This was on a major label.
I think this is why I saw this band so much in cutout bins.
It was released in 1993. It includes a cover of the Rolling Stones' 2000 Light Years from Home and a cover of the Stooges' We Will Fall, which is the last track on the album. So those are the two covers on the record.
Wait, what's the first one?
2000 Light Years from Home, track
okay.
5. I've heard a lot of bands cover that song over the years. Like the Tragically Hip covered it when they were a young cover band and stuff, and there's recordings of that. And We Will Fall is the closer, and that's the Stooges song. So, Jay, let's get into talking about this record. Which I should mention, by the way, they had a record out this year. They have not stopped putting out music.
Oh, wow.
They had an album out called Immortal Jellyfish out this year. It was in April. Yeah, April 20th of this year. And they have been very consistent. There's been some separations. They actually broke up at the end of the 90s because they all just went and did solo stuff, and then they got back together. But basically from 2005 forward, they have been consistently putting out music every couple years. And I think and so they've been together. They haven't broken up. A lot of members have been through. Scott Mercado, the original drummer in Candlebox, has been in the band. Joe Sky, what's his name? Joe Skyward. Joseph E. Howard, who's playing on this. He's the bass player in Sunny Day Real Estate was for a while when Nate Mendel didn't return because of the Foo Fighters. I think Jason Narducci is the bass player now. But anyway, they've had a lot of people from that seat. They're from the Seattle, Washington area, so they've had a lot of people from that area be in the band. Jack Endino has been in the band. If you were in Seattle, there's a chance you might have been in Sky Cries Mary.
It's kind of a institution type band.
Right.
People moving in. If you're in the scene, you just kind of move in and do your time.
Oh, Kurt Danielson, who was in Tad, he's been in the band. So that's quite the interesting. John Davison was the bassist. He joined Yes. He's their vocalist now.
Holy shit.
And then he wasn't able to get back in the band. Guys from Love Battery have been in it. The Walkabouts, who we've talked about. A lot of people have been in this band. So let's get into talking about the record. Jay, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to ask you, what works for you on A Return to the Inner Experience by Sky Cries Mary?
So it's a unique, I think, mix of psychedelic prog and early 90s alternative that doesn't really sound like anybody else at that time. I sort of get into like maybe some things that come after this that it's similar to, but it sounds ahead of its time, but still classic in a way. The bass and drums are really, holding this whole thing together. And they don't just play like straight grooves. I'm hearing like dipping into genres and pretty diverse influences, even from just the bass lines and the drum parts. I'm hearing like salsa and R&B and 60s rock and, really a wide variety. So I don't want to give the impression like this is just, four on the floor groove bass parts and then a straight drummer, because it's not. But there's still, very melodic and very important to what the song overall like is doing, because everything on top of that is very layered, atmospheric, ephemeral. Yeah, it's a lot of keyboards, both analog synth sounds and pads. So more like 80s and 90s modern stuff, but also some classic sounds, some electric piano um, mixed in here as well, and that just creates, I think, a lot of mood, drama. Allows these songs to go into really unique places. Um, Guitar wise, it's interesting because I'm hearing like alternative rock in here, but it's not necessarily from guitar, which you would expect. It's sort of the combination of everything because the guitar is very understated. It's a lot of just like little accent parts here and there, or playing off the bass line, or playing off the vocal, or maybe a riff drops in, or like a little melodic line, but it's not like these are guitar riff songs, which you would think the rock part would be coming from, but that's not necessarily the case. So just that whole combination of letting the keys and the guitars be these layers that can kind of do almost anything, that they meander and sweep and build and crescendo and um, pull in a lot of different tones, while I think you've got a pretty, solid bass and drum section that's, going in some interesting places. They're not doing anything like, I guess, crazy. There's not a it's not like proggy. There's not like time signature stuff going on here, or weird time changes, but genre wise, it moves quite a bit. I guess the last part that's holding that together for me is just vocally, it's also different. It's a lot of use of harmonized male and female vocals that sometimes lock up, sometimes are call response, sometimes just like offset a bit so you can clearly hear that they're two singers. The delivery is somewhere like, I don't know, like Jim Morrison. I hear a little bit of like Manchester kind of Happy Mondays kind of delivery. I hear maybe even like a Greg Dooley kind of delivery on the way they do the verses in 2000 Light Years from Home. Kind of this, deep spoken, angsty kind of sound. But then you get to a song like Rosaline and it sounds like a Jack White song. So there's a lot of diversity um, with the vocals that I think in the course of the record pulls all this together into this stew of like psychedelic prog alternative. Um, Again, that doesn't really sound like anybody. I think the closest like comparison I could come to just at a whole experience level for the record would be maybe the Mars Volta, in terms of like where this is trying to go, what pieces and parts it's pulling together, and sort of the ambition of it and how weird it can get at times. Kind of like a for early attempt at deconstructing rock into this, you know, psychedelic meets just open alternative expression. Like, what else can we do with it? So it definitely like also reminds me in that way of early 90s where alternative music hadn't been as defined yet. It was still an open book and you can go in a lot of different directions. So I think that's another thing about this and the way it's bringing all those sounds together that resonated for me is just going back to that early 90s time where rock or alternative rock could be anything. And this was one of the possible directions it could eventually go. So that's what worked for me. I mean, it's a pretty unique sound. How about you?
That's underselling it. When this album starts, I thought we were listening to like Enigma or Enya,
Yeah.
like one of those. I can't even like sort of wrap my brain around the fact that that stuff happened. Because if you go back and listen to Enya, which is "Sail Away," was actually the title of the song is Orinoco Flow. I discovered it's not called
Okay.
"Sail Away."
Okay.
But the point being, like, it's this sort of world music, new age pop sound that starts the record. And I was like, okay, is this going to be an instrumental album? Is this going to be like a very new agey thing? And then the stuff happens on the second record or second out or excuse me, second track where it sort of flows into it and you get the vocals started to start. You go, okay, I think I know what's going on here. I somewhat know what's going on here. And then all of a sudden you get to the third song, you think you've got it down, and White Lines by Grandmaster Flash starts, which is essentially that drum beat. Do 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 White Lines. And I was like, what is wait a minute. This is a massive pivot. You went from Enigma to Grandmaster Flash in one track. I go, okay, well, that makes sense because you have a DJ in the band. So clearly he's laying down some beats. And I think by the third or by like fourth or fifth song, I was like, all right, I'm just going to have to like let this not try to analyze this because it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
You're getting, I mean, fifth song, you get a Rolling Stones cover, which makes sense. I mean, the Rolling Stones could be very trippy and stuff, especially during the Brian Jones era when he was using the sitar and he was writing sort of your Paint It Black songs and that kind of stuff, which were trippier before they got into like the more country blues stuff later on. But point being, this has a weird and very interesting connection to multiple decades and genres. It has that 60s psychedelia sound. It has an 80s, early 80s, like gothy new wave approach at times. There's some of the stuff, especially with her vocal, that reminded me of like Susie and the Banshees or just more gothic approach. And then, like you said, there is like this alternative element to it. You can kind of hear very minimally in places where their noisier industrial background was, but it's very subtle. It was sort of like, I'm trying to imagine a comparison, and it's really hard when you have the male female vocals going. It's like psychedelic meatloaf or something. I don't know how to describe it. And it is singular. I can't think of another record from this time period that sounds like this. in terms of just combining so many weird and unusual sounds. Like if I tried to mash up, Enigma with the Stones, that's not going to come out well. But they somehow make this, it's like sort of creating a world, I guess you'd say. And they have built the world up so that I guess it kind of eases you in. I think that's the nice thing about that opening instrumental track. It sort of like eases you in. You're like, okay, I'm not sure quite what's going on, but there's a lot of sounds here that could go in different directions and whatnot. And it takes you on this ride. I mean, there are songs that are incredibly short, and then there are songs that are, 11 and 8 minutes long. It's there are no, I didn't feel like there were any rules, I guess you'd say, on this record. Like whatever sound they wanted to explore, they're going to go for it, which was really cool to hear. And I felt like this could have been the soundtrack for like some sort of weird 90s like fantasy game that you would play on your PC back then, like some adventure game, or you could maybe do Dungeons and Dragons to this. I don't know. It's a very weird record that I don't know that I've ever experienced anything like this before. I can't. Can you think of any like artists that like you were like, oh yeah, this reminds me of so and so in the totality of it? Like obviously I'm picking things out in here, but like overall this is a very strange record.
Like I said, Mars Volta was probably the closest, just in terms of
Right.
like the ingredients. I think they probably get a. I mean, I know the first couple albums, but after that, I lost track of the band. But
Right.
they probably get a little more aggressive. Um, I'm not sure they ever get. There are some, I think the first half of the record is more songs,
Mm-hmm.
less jams, which is I think what probably separates it as well. So it's hard because I think some of the stuff here, you could go down the road of like experimental bands and find somewhat close, but there's also the side of the band that is more song driven. So when you
Mm-hmm.
put the two together, it becomes even more unique. Uh, I could also make the case of like it's early 90s version of the Doors, I guess would be the way
Kind
to
of,
say
yeah.
it, in the way that they approach music, which would be the same way. Like they would do stuff that would be song driven, like pop songs, but then they would do stuff that would be super weird and expansive and psychedelic, so poetic, So I think there's that maybe angle you could take with it. If you're into that type of experience for an album, this would be like an early 90s take on that potentially. It's not well, let's get into the
Well, I want to quote or relay what Eric Peterson said in his submission because I think it's important.
yeah.
He said Seattle's contribution to psychedelic rock, blending dreamy atmospheres with unexpected elements. They have a dreamlike and ethereal sound, and feel like that is occasionally interrupted by buzzing guitars and even some Euro disco rave beats. And this was the question that was posed: is this genre bending approach or does this genre bending approach represent the experimental spirit of the 90s, or does it lack focus? Now let's talk about what doesn't work.
Mm. Yeah, that's a interesting way to frame it. It's so to me, my experience with it was I hear the song oriented side of the band push towards the front. And as the record goes, it becomes less focused. You step into, there's some interesting parts and pieces, but like song wise, they become expansive, more jam oriented, even though it's not necessarily like a performance oriented album. Uh, you know, where you're like, listening for guitar solos or, you know, players, even though they're there, it's more of a, overall presentation, but the songs get expansive and the runtimes start to get longer and the ideas become less, um, I guess, focused and concise. Rosaline is probably the exception on the second half of the album, where it is a very focused, very different sound, which I actually like quite a bit. Um, but the most of it after, for me, track 7 becomes, leaning heavier into the psychedelic realm, less song oriented. And while I like the ambition there and there's some ideas I like in that half of the album, it becomes overall, I think, less compelling to me as a whole. It's a lot of material. Um, no, the songs don't always pay off. There's stuff on there like Rain and Ocean, which Humanity is, which are just kind of slow and swirling and mm, not super interesting for the runtime. There's some sounds and things that happen in those songs that I like, and passively they're fine. But as I focused on them and really tried to experience them and engage with them, I found them to be, a bit dull. And that happens again, as the second half of the record plays. There's some ups and downs, but Corner Man is another example, where it just kind of meanders for me. Leans a, We Will Fall and Corner Man. I think you get that kind of Jim Morrison kind of delivery, but they just, I don't know, don't resolve for me very well in terms of songs. So that'd be my biggest complaint is, unsurprisingly, I'm gravitating more to the focused song oriented part of the band, and I'm embracing the diversity there and the way that they're constructing these songs and sort of the core identity of the band. And I am bored when they explore the space. I think the formula becomes less compelling the longer the songs get and the broader the focus becomes. How about you? What didn't work?
When they get just sort of into grooves, that's where it doesn't break down. It just becomes, if you're in a mood to be hypnotized, let's put it that way, it's probably fine. But when you're trying to like wrap your brain around the structure of the song and like, oh, there is no structure, it's just a congo and a drum loop going for 5 minutes and then vamping on top of it, then it's a slightly less interesting. Now there are examples where this I like Broken Down. It reminds me of an alternate universe Stevie Nicks song for some reason.
Wow. Okay.
her voice gets into that like raspy 80s stand back Stevie Nicks sound that I like. And
See, that's one of the songs that to me felt like kind of a UK Manchester kind of
mhm,
vibe in terms of the groove of that and just that and I think moving is it moving like water? No, gone.
Gone. Yeah, that's the
That and
one.
gone were
Yeah.
where it kind of it clicked for me of oh that's what this band's trying to do. They're doing an American version of what they're hearing
Mhm.
come out of the UK.
Yes. But leaning much heavier into the trippy psychedelic jammy end of things, like you said, on songs like Rain, where they're, as you mentioned, leaning into that Doors sort of slow and intense vibe.
Hmm.
Whereas I feel, the Manchester bands, if they weren't dancing, they were rocking.
Yeah, yeah,
And this doesn't rock per se.
yeah. This goes in a some dark areas and tones. I mean, I could argue the bass line for Rain, like when that song starts, could have been turned into an early '90s Metallica song or a Black Sabbath song. Like just listen to that minor bass line, you're like, oh, you can imagine like heavy guitars coming in on this and like it going a totally different direction than it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just like the between the keyboards and some of the bass stuff, there it can take a dark turn that I think some of the UK bands would never take.
I completely agree. Now, what's interesting is this was, like I mentioned, this is Capitol Records, which was a big deal. I had a hard time finding any reviews for this. There's All Music has a review, which was fairly good. It was like 3.5 out of 5 stars. But there's hardly anything on like Rate Your Music, anything on Album of the Year. There's just like there's nothing out there when you're looking for review. I mean, there's reviews for people who have bought it on Amazon and stuff like that, but I even typed in the band name and the album and review just to find, because I was like, well, there has to be reviews from like Spin or Rolling Stone, and maybe they're just not archived. But I hardly found anything on this, which is just it's strange because it's one of those bands that's like been around forever, but people don't talk about. They're very regional, I guess, in that way.
Well, it's strange in that again, I'll go back to the cutout bin uh, observation, right? There's a lot of bands in the 90s, particularly that I remember from the early 90s that I would find in cutout bins that were released on major labels and were doing really strange things that you could argue at probably if you were an A&R, maybe it worked locally
Mm-hmm.
or even you heard it and thought, oh shit, this is where music's going to potentially go. I better sign this band. So they were one foot in the 80s and one foot in somewhere really weird.
Yeah.
And cutout bins were full of bands like this. Um, and you'd put them on and be like, sometimes, holy shit, this is gold, or what, this is a mess. So I definitely think there was if you look at who was being signed, probably between 88 and 94, I just guess there's just a lot of bands like this that when it came time to promote the record, the marketing department and the powers that be probably said, how do we market this? Like, awesome, you signed this, but like now we have to put together a marketing strategy to sell this particular record, and we have no idea how to do that. Does this go to
Yeah.
college radio? I mean, what song on here are you sending to, major rock commercial radio, mainstream radio? So that happened quite a bit. So that's not odd to me. I think what's odd is that the bands endured because these bands I'm talking about typically that would be devastating for most
Mm-hmm.
bands, right? You put all this energy, you set expectations high. I'm on Capitol Records or insert major label here. They put money into the record, we hand it to them, and now they're basically killing it. Most bands just give up, right? That's devastating. But this band somehow didn't. They kept putting out albums up till you said what, this year, last year? I think that's the part that's,
To this year, yeah.
and they continue to be what sounds like a sort of institution for local Seattle music. So that part is very unique to me.
It should be noted, this has never been released on vinyl, which seems like this would be a vinyl hipster, trippy thing that you'd want to throw onto a turntable and chill out to it. But um, Capitol's never re-released it. It's just had a CD reissue in the early 2000s, and that's it.
Mm.
But no vinyl. Like this seems made for a double album with a gatefold and some trippy artwork, on the inside where you open it up and maybe there's some like weird, collage or some sort of, I don't know, maybe it's like a pop-up book in the middle when you open it and like these things pop up and
Well, it has that I think the reason it always stood out to me when I remember this band is they, particularly on this album, the album cover has that Von Oliver, Pixies kind of look to it.
mm-hmm.
That I loved. It's kind of classic now, considered, classic 90s graphic design. Now, looking at the credits, it was sort of a collaboration of a bunch of members, bands, and different people to do this. But it netted a pretty distinctive look that they kind of carried through the rest of the albums. And I think to your point, like you could imagine that, being done in vinyl in a really elaborate way.
Yeah. I'm surprised that hasn't happened. There was no, I guess there was a single released, Gone. Makes sense. Has that, you said, Manchester vibe. They did a radio edit to get that down to under 4 minutes. It was released. It looks like the US got a release of that, but other than that, there's no other. I mean, they put out like I guess they put out a 7-inch or no, they put out a 12-inch EP for some of the songs. Looks like, maybe 2000 Light Years from Home also got a release, but maybe they're trying to do the Black Crowes thing, break them with a cover.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense. You could imagine being handed this album in 93 and saying, okay, how do we market this? What singles are there? Yeah, I could see a lot of logic of let's go with the Stones cover, and hey, we don't do very much vinyl. I mean, starting around 88, major labels dramatically cut back on the
Right.
vinyl they're shipping. So like you're handed this, are you going to put it on? Are you going to pay to print it on vinyl? Probably not. You're going to put it out as cheaply as you possibly can to meet the contractual obligations of releasing it. Just because, it's a tough album to market.
Yeah, it should be noted this was the uh the only or the last release on Capitol Records. They moved to World Domination Recordings for their next album.
Well, there you go.
Which had, that wasn't like a tiny label. It's a UK label with quite a lot of releases. Like we're talking over 200 releases. Then they released their 97 album, which is called Moonbathing on Sleeping Leaves. That was released on Warner Brothers. So they got back onto another major label.
Wow. That's very unusual. See, this is what I'm saying. This is the part of the story of this band that's so unusual.
Yes. It's not that the band existed. It's
Yeah.
It's that two different A&R guys went, I'm going to sign this band and see what I can do with them. Now, maybe in 96.
Like, yeah, it made more sense.
Yeah.
Later. I mean, I think this sounds ahead of its time.
Oh, I think it would have fit in, like, if you stuck this band on the Horde tour in the mid 90s or opening for Fish, or you know what I mean, like those kinds of bands. Yeah, I think so. I don't know what their trajectory was like touring wise, or if they did a lot of touring, or if they've remained sort of like a Seattle institution or whatnot. But
this band needed to cultivate like a rabid fan base.
Yeah.
Not a huge fan base, but like a dedicated right? If they were one of those bands, which, experimental electronic bands are able to do
Yep.
this, even experimental post-rock bands or, that we've talked a lot about. Do you get that core, like we just did Mogwai, right? It's a
Hmm.
good example. Like Mogwai has a very dedicated, passionate fan base. They will never be, a huge radio band, but they can probably, a band like that can move around to different labels if they want. It doesn't really matter because,
They can do
right,
soundtracks.
they're going to sell a certain amount of albums every time they put an album out. They can go
Hmm.
tour anytime they want and draw, good, decent theater crowds. I don't get the sense that this band outside of Seattle did that. And that's probably the biggest issue for them was then you become beholden to major labels.
Yes. Well, Jay, let's talk about our overall ratings on this album. Were the album better EP or decent single? Where do you land?
I'm going to land on an EP. Passively, I didn't have an issue with this. I kind of liked putting it on and just kind of working to it. Um, but that said, I would. It's very long. I mean, I'm showing an hour 17-minute runtime.
Yeah, well, the last song I think is from the reissue. It was
Okay.
originally 14 songs, so that last 7 minutes is bonus.
Okay, so it's an hour 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay, that's bonkers. I would take the first 6 or 7 tracks straight up. I like Rosaline. I could listen to a whole album of that style, by the way. That's like a very different style from the rest of the album. It's kind of I think in context of this, you could treat it as like a little like reset moment. Um, and I like Joey's aria. That is a cool to me, like if this band is gonna indulge in the more time into the experimental side, instrumental side, that is a sound that I thought worked really well. It's a little bit like warmer, fuzzier. It kind of is erupting.
more
It has
post rock.
Yeah, it has a little more power behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind hearing more material like that. So I would trim it down to the first 6 or 7 songs, Rosaline and Joey's. I mean, that would still be an album. I mean, you'd still be probably pushing 40, 45 minutes with that. And I would cut the rest, which I think are just, I don't know. They're fine. They're just nothing. Everything I like about those extra songs, I hear in the ones I picked. So I think you get a more concise, digestible album if you trim back quite a bit of the material from the second half and go with an EP. How about you?
I agree with you. I think I would take the first 5 songs, then Lay Down Your Head, Broken Down, Rosaline, and Joey's Aria, which again, that's like 8 songs, but it's much shorter. Um, I mean, geez, We Will Fail basically almost takes up an entire side of a vinyl record. It's 11
Yeah, it's
minutes.
11 minutes.
I mean, if you put that and Rain on the same side, that's just too long. It's crazy songs. Uh, but I like what you said. Like I also just would put this on and it would just drift and I would, be fine. It's when I had to sit down and concentrate and I was
Yeah.
like, oh wow, this is really difficult to sit down and just concentrate for
Mhm.
77 minutes. I should not have to do that at this age. I should not be required to concentrate on anything for that long.
Yeah.
I've earned my time off.
It's become difficult. Yes.
But I think I would have been frustrated back when this came out. Back when this is 93. I'm 19 years old when this comes out. I wouldn't have had the patience for this.
Yeah. I wonder, I thought about that. Had I plucked this one out instead of some others from the bargain bin, uh, how I would have reacted to it in 93. You know, I probably would have liked some of it,
Mm-hmm.
but, and you're experiencing it as a CD, so you're going to be more committed to the whole runtime.
Well, and there was also a 60s revival in the early 90s. Like the Doors movie came out. That's
Yeah,
when I got into the Doors
that's true.
because
Yep.
I got the soundtrack, or not the sound. There was a Doors double album best of that like everybody got around the same time, and who bought Doors stuff. And there was Dazed and Confused that came out, I think, in '93. So like there was this like '70s revival psychedelic trippiness thing happening, because remember,
Mhm.
this is 2 years after Nirvana, so things are just going in weird directions.
Yeah, for
There
sure.
was no, people, like we've talked about this numerous times and we said it even on the show, people were just getting signed because they were like throwing darts trying to figure out, and this is a Seattle band, so of course you're going to sign a Seattle band that probably draws okay in
Yeah.
Seattle.
Hmm.
um
Sounds like it. Yeah.
uh,
Now, I think I can appreciate it now, the added context of what's happened since, and a lot of more like historical knowledge has helped me understand where the band's coming from and
mhm.
even understand the layering. This was a interesting headphone listen, and it was almost too busy in my headphones at times. And the
Yeah,
speakers, it worked better. Like I could just, I think, grab onto the bass lines and let the rest of it kind of happen in the distance. But once I put headphones on, I was like, wow, there's a lot going on here. And I think in the 93, 94, when it came out, I don't know that I could have processed it as well as I can now.
100% agree. There was a lot going on, and uh yeah, this needed a heavier producing hand in some respects to just tighten up a little bit here and there. Not that it's bad, it's just obviously we both gave it better EP, so we have some issues, but I just feel like, oh, it's very indulgent. Just put it
Yeah.
that way. It's just
Now,
very indulgent.
that's a good way to put it.
So we need to thank Eric Peterson for his suggestion, A Return to the Inner Experience by Sky Cries Mary. I thought Sky Cries Mary was like a blues band, to be honest. For some reason in my head, Sky Cries Mary, because my brain associates it with Jimi Hendrix, like The Wind Cries Mary. I was like, oh, this must be like a bluesy kind of thing, bluesy psychedelic thing. Like, oh, there's no blues. This is not bluesy rock. So I was completely wrong on my assumption going into this.
You were thinking like the Hendrix reference. Is that what
Yeah,
you're yeah. I think at the time when I saw this in the cut up bins, that was where my head was like at was, oh, based on the name and some aspects of the imagery. It was like, oh, this is gonna be like a classic rock kind of tinged thing. Which
right.
I guess it is, but not in the way that I would have expected in
No.
93.
And Return to Inner Experience, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Sky Cries, like
Yeah.
there was all this like, oh, this must be like, yeah, 70s or 60s psychedelic blues influenced stuff. And it
But I
was
think
psychedelic,
because
but not bluesy.
it's not guitar driven.
It's not guitar driven. Yeah, exactly.
I think you could isolate some of these riffs and guitar parts and be like, oh, that's a bluesy line. But the way, because it's not a blues, it's not a guitar driven song, that line just becomes like a layer in something else. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
it would have been unexpected to me in 93, looking at the imagery of the band and name, my expectations at that time. Like, I would have thought this would be a blues driven, like a weirder Black Crows is probably where my head would have been.
That's a good, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would have put it on and be like, what the Black Crows don't have keyboards. What's going on here?
Yeah. Well, if you out there have enjoyed this discussion about Sky Cries Mary, maybe you are a big Sky Cries Mary fan, you just discovered this podcast. I hope that we've given this a proper discussion for you. But if you also have positive vibes and good memories about the 90s in general, you can join us at digmeoutpodcast.com to explore our free archive of over 800 episodes, history of the band posts, and weekly new release roundups. Do you want more? Well, you can get more by
Yes.
becoming a paid subscriber. Jay, that includes you. Why aren't you paying?
Me?
Yeah,
Oh, I pay every day.
pay with your life, Jay. This podcast has taken years off of your
How many posts do you think we have on the website now?
Posts,
Yeah, total posts.
just
So
posts.
that would be episodes plus all the extra content.
4,000.
Almost 2,000.
Okay.
So it's all 80s and 90s episodes, bonus episodes plus history of the band articles and
Polls.
polls, everything else. So yeah,
And that's just current. Like that didn't pull in all the previous poll posts,
right.
right?
Yeah,
All the
just
previous.
previous episodes from the, but nothing. I mean, we didn't start posting on the website exclusively till like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So everything before that, no.
So in reality, we probably have way more.
Yeah. But
So
go to the website. There's a ton of stuff there.
there you go. And while you're there, you can suggest an album you think deserves to be featured on a future episode of Dig Me Out. For Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. I'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.